Hello, my name is David Shipley, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Beauceron Security. And in today's session, we're going to tackle the question, do anti-phishing programs even work? I've been a Canadian Forces soldier, a newspaper reporter, a digital marketer for the University of New Brunswick, and I became a cybersecurity professional on Mother's Day 2012, accidentally. Because on that day, I got a nasty email from a hacktivist group called Team Digital. And in the email, they proclaimed that they had confidential information from the university posted to Payspin and that we had had a major security failure. I looked at the email, quickly ran home, checked out the details, and it was legitimate. And I raised the alarm to my colleagues in the IT department to let them know about the breach and to offer my help. I spent that entire Mother's Day Sunday dealing with the incident response and recovery. And afterwards, the CIO asked me to be part of the cybersecurity leadership team protecting the university. Between 2012 and 2017, I spent 5 years helping develop a comprehensive program to reduce cyber risk for the University of New Brunswick. As part of that work, I realized that people, process, and culture matter more than technology when it comes to cyber risk. A big part of my experience was implementing an anti-phishing awareness and education program. Now, when we think about anti-phishing awareness and education platforms, there are often three typical criticisms that keep popping up. And this happens at least semi-annually with some kind of a major headline. The first criticism, they don't reduce click rates to zero, that they're not a silver bullet. The second one is that they can create a negative emotional experience for employees and erode trust between employees and organizations. And the third is we don't need to worry about training people about phishing if only we had paid for a better secure email gateway, anti-phishing filtering solution to deal with the threat. Let's tackle these criticisms one at a time. First, the myth of 0%. The objective of a robust anti-phishing program is not to get to 0%. I can get to 0% or close to zero pretty easily by gaming the difficulty of the phishing emails that I sent. The goal is to reduce the click rate to a manageable amount, but it's not about making sure that no one ever clicks on an email ever again. That's not the objective. Now, what's really important is that we create programs that have adaptive difficulty based on where the individual is in their educational journey. And we need to leverage great models like the NIST Phish Scale difficulty measurement tool. The NIST Phish Scale allows organizations to measure the contextual difficulty of a phish to an individual and an organization. It's not based on solely whether someone clicked on it or not and the percentage of users that clicked on it to assess that difficulty. There's a very sophisticated model, and it's important to leverage this in the development and execution of your phishing simulation programs. It's also important to use automated randomization of phishing templates to reduce bias. It can be really tempting when you first start out to create a very difficult series of phish or a limited one that you know is going to get a high click rate right off the gate. But that's not realistic to the threat environment your organization actually faces. You want to make sure that you have a mix of easy, medium, and hard phishes, again, as measured by using frameworks like the NIST Phish Scale, and make sure you deliver them at a random date and time to each user to keep everyone on their toes. And you're aiming for a click rate that's more than 1% and less than 5%. The best organizations have a click rate of 3%. And we'll talk about why that 3% makes sense in the context of other security controls and incident best practices. We've all seen the headlines, whether it's sending a bonus phish right after your company has layoffs, whether it's using employee rewards or COVID information as a lure, or other sensitive topics, perhaps around romance. The wrong phish topic in a simulation can be highly damaging. and it can cause a lot of negative emotions, whether it's upset feelings, confusion, or anger in users. But there are ways of reducing and mitigating this risk. And there are ways of actually turning the employee sentiment around phishing simulation programs from a negative experience to a positive one. First, you need to make sure that you've created a powerful mechanism for recognizing and rewarding users for properly reporting phishing simulations. All too often in our industry, the focus is on the click rate, how many people fell victim. And in that scenario, the only way for people to win is not to lose, that is, not to fall victim. But if you create a scenario where individuals are rewarded and recognized, even as simple as a thank you, or as part of their performance, noting that they've done a good job regularly reporting phishing simulations, you change this from something that you just can't lose to something you can actually win. And if you can find a way to automate and provide people feedback for real phishing attacks, it becomes an incredibly powerful incentive and really motivates individuals to care about protecting the organization. This turns the emotional equation away from the negative feelings around being tricked to more positive ones about the difference individuals can make, and of course, their ability to learn and grow as people. One of my favorite myths is, if we just had technology X, we wouldn't have any phishing at all. The reality is, regardless of whether you're using Microsoft's ATP, Proofpoint, Mimecast, Barracuda, the list goes on. Phishing emails still get through. With some research by ourselves, as well as some of our competitors, indicating that as many as 50% of highly sophisticated credential phish are bypassing secure email gateways. The truth is this: all secure email gateways, all of them, have a failure rate, whether it's because of limitations in the technology or in combination with how they're deployed by organizations who may be more afraid of missing legitimate emails than letting the odd attack through. And artificial intelligence or machine learning models are a great addition, but they are not a silver bullet. The right phish at the right time can still get through. Now, I'll tell you a story about the power and impact of an anti-phishing awareness program had when I was at the University of New Brunswick. While at UNB, we had lowered our phishing click rate, our susceptibility, from 30% to less than 5% over 6 months. And what was interesting is we had dramatically increased the percentage of employees regularly spotting and reporting email attacks or other security concerns. We called this the sheepdog effect, the idea that people could go from being the passive victims of cybercrime to the active defenders. And it was a remarkable success. And it couldn't have come at a better time. About the time we had lowered our click rate down, we got hit with a massive upswing in malicious attachment emails that were targeting the university after another Canadian institution paid a ransom. We went from about 100,000 malicious email attachments hitting our domain per month to more than 1.2 million. And while our secure email gateway was good, it had about a 5% slippage rate. Now, 5% of 100,000 getting through is one problem. 5% of 1.2 million is a whole other problem. And yet we didn't suffer a catastrophic incident because we had lowered our susceptibility dramatically. And it's a perfect example of how sheepdogs can help spot and protect your organization and reduce your risk. Now, when we talk about phishing, there are 3 key metrics your organization needs to pay attention to. And we're going to show you with data from more than 3 million simulations sent across 300 organizations over multiple years, what the impact has been when it comes to these 3 key factors. First is click rate. Click rate is the percentage of people who fell victim, regardless of whether it was a link-based, attachment-based, or credential capture phish. Second is report rate. What were the percentage of the organizational members who consistently reported an email simulation using things like a report a phish button or forwarding email into the IT help desk? And finally, One metric that we've pioneered that's incredibly important is the ignore rate. Ignore is the difference between click and report. These are the percentage of employees who just deleted the message or didn't interact with it and didn't report it. In the past, we had given advice as security professionals to just delete emails you think are suspicious. But there are two problems with that. The first is you're denying the opportunity for the individual to be recognized and congratulated for their skill in spotting and reporting a phish. Secondly, in the event of a real attack, you're denying yourself critical intelligence about what's getting by your security controls and how effective they really are. So it's really important to target this ignore rate as something we want to lower. Now, as you can see on this chart, a very positive trend occurs over these 24 months. Now, month 0 is the simple average of any organization without phishing awareness education programs in place. And we validated this, as have numerous others in their industry, with typical click rates in the 30 to 35% range. Now with Boseram, with the approach that we've taken in the experiments that we ran, we use a fully randomized phishing model. That is, each employee gets a random phish at a random date and time. With some of our clients using adaptive difficulty, so each person starts at medium or easy, then goes medium, and then becomes more difficult, or they're just pure random. Now, in the first 90 days of our approach, you can see we lower that click rate from 30% to less than 5%. That's faster and better than any organization's published rates we are aware of today. It can take some other approaches as long as 12 months to achieve similar results. And as you can see, we see consistent improvement over the next 12 months and over the next 2 years. Now it gets to a point where that gain starts to plateau. And the point of lowering this click rate is to target a click rate that's low enough that in the event of a major attack, you have the incident response capacity to effectively shut down any compromised accounts or individuals quickly within your organization. That's one metric. I believe that the report rate is a better metric. The report rate is a metric that measures knowledge, how many people knew this email was suspicious, as well as attitude, how many people cared enough to report it. And you can see a dramatic improvement in the first 3 months with the report a phish approach that we've taken, which is tied to our approach to gamification, this whole idea of getting status and recognition and acknowledgement when you do the right thing. And we actually continue to drive that improvement in the first 2 years, increasing the report rate by 285%, which is awesome. And then finally, the ignore rate. You can see here a steady, consistent improvement in the ignore rate for organizations. And we're working on new approaches that will actually provide new feedback to individuals in their personal dashboard, as well as digests to encourage them to report the emails that they've actually been sent. So how do we create effective, fair, and useful phishing awareness programs? First, we need to have good boundaries and governance in place. And you need to make sure that, particularly for mid and large scale enterprise, you've created connections between important stakeholder groups like internal communications, human resources. If you have organized labor in your organization, having a connection to the union leadership is important. And setting boundaries. There are certain topics that are like throwing dynamite into a pond. Romance, sex, and others are considered off limits for employee education programs because, well, yes, they will yield high click rates. The damage they do is disproportionate to the benefit they provide to the organization. And remember, the objective here is education, not seeing how clever a social engineer you are. Leverage automation and randomization, as well as individual difficulty progression paths. This helps ensure fairness. And ultimately, approaches like the NIST phish scale help you achieve those goals. It's not about how tricky you can be. It's about giving people realistic examples and building them up. If you have a very controversial phish topic, say, for example, around COVID-19 or around bonuses of certain employee incentives that might be sensitive for your organization, don't necessarily have to use them as phishing simulations. You can use other delivery mechanisms like email newsletters, internal portals, and other things to let people know about these threats that you don't necessarily want to emulate as part of your phishing simulation program. Putting in place multi-stage remedial education and a progression path for employees that uses different approaches and educational methods to help reduce repeat clickers. We've created for many organizations paths that start with a reminder of the technical aspects of phish for the first stage, the first time they fell victim. For the second time in the first year that they fell victim, we move on to talking about the emotional cognitive tells of phishing. And then from there, different stages of intervention can be planned. One thing we recommend, if someone has clicked 4 or more times, consider, and this can be a relatively small population, interviewing them for about 30 minutes. Learn about their work, the things they're doing, their attitude towards phishing. Listen and use motivational interviewing techniques to help the person intrinsically want to do better. Last, and certainly not least, celebrate positive behaviors loudly and often. One of my favorite stories is working with a police department. We showed off their annual phishing results after a 12-month campaign with one phish once per month. And one of their emergency dispatchers, she had spotted and reported all 12 simulations. And the police senior management actually sent a memo talking about the annual results for the entire organization, how well they had done in reducing their click rate, how well they were doing at reporting, and celebrating this top reporter and others. And this is really how we create a better anti-phishing education program. Now, there is a ton of research on the value of anti-phishing awareness programs. This is one great resource I recommend folks looking at. It's a literature review looking at the summary of some of the great research that's been done up to 2020. And this research has a strong statement. Phishing is a growing security issue, both for institutions and for individuals. And although there are various mitigation techniques, proactive anti-phishing education and training is an important building block of a multi-level phishing defense strategy. So yes, anti-phishing education programs work. We have the data to demonstrate it. And yes, you need to do them, and you need to do them well. And there's an increasing body of research that there are benefits for the organization and the individual beyond just reducing clicks. In research out of Switzerland posted in late 2021, research showed that in an experiment that crowdsourced phishing detection can enable organizations to detect a large number of previously unseen real attacks with a short delay from the start of the campaign, so very quickly and effectively. And there are easy ways to triage the flow of this information to make the experience valuable for the individual and valuable for the organization. Thank you so much for your time today. I look forward to any questions you may have and would love to chat with you and your organization about how to implement effective anti-phishing awareness programs in 2022.